Hello again to the attendees of today's Phase 2 DC Fast Priority Corridors Program webinar. We had announced at 1 o'clock that we were giving people some extra time to join the webinar. We have a lot of attendees today. I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to start the webinar from the beginning. So we're giving a little bit of a cushion 5 minutes after 1. So again, for everyone that is here, thank you again for joining us, and we will begin in just a few more minutes. All right, everyone, it is 5 minutes after 1. We are looking to start this afternoon's webinar on Phase 2 of the DC FAST program. Dave, whenever you're ready, feel free to begin your presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. Welcome to the Volkswagen DC Fast Phase 2 RFP. A lot of people on this that are very excited about this funding. I'm actually very, very excited. Again, my name is Dave Willis. I'm an environmental program consultant with the Division of Air Quality. I am the program lead for the DC Fast. Stephen Rice is my partner in crime. He'll help me score these projects when they come in. So what can you expect today with, and it's not at, there we go. Okay. So what can you expect today? We're basically going to do a quick overview of the DC Fast Priority Corridor Program, when and how to submit your application, the basics of the scoring criteria that's built into the RFP, where to find information after this workshop is done, and we're going to answer as many of your questions as possible, and we'll stick around as long as that takes. Just as a reminder, this is not a public forum for comments on the implementation of the Volkswagen settlement. The DC Fast Priority Corridor Program, this RFP was released February 14th, so guess what? It's active now. Application system, the grant management system actually opened on the 14th as well. The date you need to remember is May 16th. These applications are due May 16th before midnight. Just do that's the most important date that you'll take through this whole thing. be done before May 16th. You'll see this slide a couple times because it's important. If you're not on our VW email list, send us an email to this address with the subject subscribe, and we'll add you to that email list. It is the best place to get information first about what's going on in the program. All of our news goes to that list. So these are some of the DC Fast sites that we paid for in phase one. Those success stories are up on our webpage, and very happy with how phase one went. A lot of things were done well in phase one. So how much money are we talking about in this phase? Okay, so for the priority corridors, we're breaking the DC Fast up into two groups, priority corridors and existing sites. The priority corridors are just targeting the priority corridors, and these are going to be new sites, and it's almost $5 million. The existing sites will be to either replace or expand existing sites, and that'll come out in April, and that's just over $2 million. For level two, which the first level two for state agencies was just released yesterday, then we'll have three more for the level two. The publicly accessible, which if you have level two that you're interested in, you're going to be on another one. Steven will actually be doing another one of these workshops for those RFPs. Also, that's multi-unit dwellings, and then another one for workplace. We've actually committed to putting the 15% allowable from the mitigation trust into ZEV infrastructure. So this phase, that's just over $10 million. So there's a lot of money to go around, and hopefully we will be able to get that out as quickly as possible. For the DC Fast programs, it's easier to talk about who's not eligible. Government organizations are eligible. Non-government organizations are eligible. The only individuals are not eligible. You have to be a business entity. Now, there's all the legal language in the RFP, but that's basically what it boils down to. So, this is the RFP again for the DC fast charging sites along identified priority corridors. But we haven't given you, oh wait, here's a map of the priority corridors. The map is not perfect. There is a list, a table form of what the priority corridors are. Every intersection of these major corridors, as you can see on, give you an example of 85, it gives you 64. That's a conjoining highway. I think that's 401 and 29. That's actually 85 the whole distance. The same with 40 going to the western part of the state and 26. So just be careful, look at the table, only use the map as a reference to see if you're close, and then double check your table for whether you're in a priority corridor or not. If you have questions about that, please definitely either send me an email or give me a call, and I will definitely help you with that. So this funding is for the DC Fast priority corridors. But what if your proposed location is not on the priority corridor? Please, 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 please don't skip this. Please apply. About 2/3 of our phase one projects were on the priority corridor. Another third were not. We're trying to get the bare bones of a DC fast network across the state. We're at roughly 80 some public DC fast sites across North Carolina. We need like more closer to 800, and that's just scraping the surface of what we're going to need in the next 5 years. So let's talk about what you're going to need to have to apply for this. First, you're going to need to have access to the GMS. You're going to have some general things with GMS as the grant management system. Um, you're going to have a few things related to your application. Basically, um, you're going to have project information. Where is it going to go? The address, the GPS coordinates, what kind of charging equipment you're going to put in, the material estimates. You're going to have some budget related items. You're going to have, if you don't own the site where your location is going to be, you're going to have a host site agreement, or a letter of commitment. When you go to contract, you'll actually have to have the agreement uploaded. We'll also need a map, some sort of sketch. Google works pretty well for this to give us a sketch of your location, where your charger is going to be, so we know what we're talking about. Um, just kind of your overall plans and what's going on with your project. And we're going to step through each one of those. So, just as a reminder, do not wait till the last week to get access to the grant management system. It is a process that it takes a couple of days to go through, and not all of it is in our control. So, how do you get into the grant management system? First, you have to have an NCID. We have an instructional PDF that walks you through the NCID process on how to get that NCID. Your NCID username and passwords become your credentials, your password and login for the grant management system. It's a single sign-on type system. We as state employees use it for email, everything. So, and that's get backwards. Sorry. Okay, so after you get your NCID, um, you have to complete this online form. We changed this from the paper copy to this online form, and it automatically loads your information into the grant management system. Then the Volkswagen team, we have to go in and match your user, your NCID up to your business entity. And that's what we have to have your W-9 for, your North Carolina substitute W-9, not the federal W-9. We'll enter your business entity if you're not in the grant management system already. This is becoming a statewide system where lots of other agencies across the state are using it for grant management. When you submit that, we'll process it and send it on to the SAP team, which is security, the IT security team. They'll process it, and you'll get an email back from NCDOT IT SAP, which is SAP support services. Just as a reminder, you can only have 3 authorized users per account. Now, the grant management system can be accessed at this web address that's here. The GMS instructions can be found there, and we also have a downloadable manual for the GMS, and then I will show you how to get into a training library as we move forward. So your login looks like this. It says EBS, or it actually says Enterprise Business Services, but we're the state, and we love our acronyms. So once you log in, you'll have a home screen like this. The training library is there, like I mentioned. Also, this is where you would create your new application or log in to view your application, or to edit your application once you've created one. On this account, there's not been one created yet. And I will say that all of us with the Volkswagen team, we're well qualified to talk to you about GMS. For me, I entered 33 applications in last time. Since we took those in paper form last time, we entered all of the applications in after the fact and then all the claims are being processed. So if you have questions, please call us. We will definitely help you. So when you first start off and you're creating a new application, you click on Create New Application. It's going to pop up and you're going to have to search for your program ID. Hey, guess what? Your DC fast charge. That's what you're going to fill out. Priority corridor. That's the one. But if you're also applying for something else, these are right now, actually, there's 4 that would appear now because the level 2 state agency is on there. So you would select the one that you're interested in, and in this case, it would be the DC Fast Priority Corridor. You're going to get basically a blank application, and it's going to look similar to this. A lot of this information is going to come pre-filled. You can see that on this application I'm on, it does have version tracking. It's going to tell you that we'll do the laser pen. It's going to tell you that which version you're on, what you're applying for. If you're doing multiple, you can see your NCID is there and the date it was last changed. Your organization name is going to show up, and this is pre-populated because we're linking most of this to your NCID. If you have multiple, you would have to select which organization if you're a consultant and you're doing this for multiple places, you would be linked to multiple business entities and you would have a drop down box here, I think. And then your project title, that would be something that you would enter, and then that your tax identification number is whatever was on your W-9. These come, since you're already in, it's going to pre-fill some of these in for you. And you're just going to go through and fill out everything. When you're ready to go to the next page, I would suggest as you're processing through it that you check this to make sure everything's right. If there's a error checking on some of these, like the latitude and longitudes have to be in a certain range. For this page, as long as it's all completed and appropriate, it should let you through to the next page. So some of these things have a few fields that are helpful. If you are the authorized representative, the project manager, and the financial contact, you can copy your information on each one of these. Just hit the button and hit the button and then go to the next page. Those were the projects that I really appreciated. I didn't have to type as much. So now we're getting into the meat of what you're actually doing. So if you're installing, for most of mine, you're only going to have one line here because you're only going to have one set of chargers for the DC fast. But you might have 2 or 4 ports, or 1 to 4 ports, depending on what size you are. The number of parking spaces that you're going to have, and then your charging capacity. And the charging capacity should be, if your maximum, not your maximum, but what's the charging rate of each port. So if you have 2 ports, but your charger's max is 100, but it'll only charge 2 ports at 50 kilowatts, then you would put 50 kilowatts, because if you're using both ports at the same time, then it's 50 kilowatts. And if you're going to have questions about that, I understand, talk to me and we'll work through them. As Brian Phillips says, there are no stupid questions, there's only stupid answers. And sometimes I will definitely give bad information, but I'll do my best not to. So now you've got your budget items. A lot of these are pre-calculated. So you'll have to go in and fill out each one of those for your matches and your requested funds, your match, and other funds from a different organization. If it's coming from another organization, it is required for you to tell us where that's coming from. And then you'll check this, and these are pre-calculated. There's total down at the bottom for you automatically. Essays. Yes, we do review your essays. They are read. If your project, the way it worked in phase one was if your project was in a county where there was multiple projects, if there was a tie between two of those projects, your essays were read by the selection committee and a project was awarded based on who they thought was most likely to have the project installed on time and had the best project. That did happen twice in phase one. There'll be more projects this time. Hopefully, we won't have any ties, but if we do, your priority corridor program essays will be used. So don't skimp and don't exaggerate either because we've read a few of these and we'll be able to tell. Um, I know this is hard to read. I did print these out for you in a little bit larger format, and yes, these will be available on our website after this is over. So when you're ready, you're getting ready to submit your application. Um, you can save it and close it. Or at any point during this, there's a save and close on every page. When you get ready to submit, you'll have to hit the check button. Everything will have to be signed. If something's not filled out, you'll have to go back and fix it. You can still save it and close it. Once you hit the submit button, you can't change your application. We we can't really change your application either. We'd have to reject it, send it back to you. It's a little bit more of a process. But everything goes through, you submit, you hit the submit button after you've digitally signed this and it's dated, and you're going to get a screen like this. I want to look, these are a little bit off. But this number right here is pretty important. This is your application ID. You'll need to save that. If you're not attaching any files at this point, you can always open this up later to attach the required attachments. While your application is submitted, it's not viewed as complete until you have all your attachments. There's a list, a link to the checklist right here. So please understand if we reach back out to you and tell you your application is submitted, but we don't have your attachments, that's what we're talking about. You have to get those things off the checklist into us. So you can either attach them now or you can attach them later because you can do attachments after you've submitted your application. So you've already created, and I'm noticing some of the errors has moved during this. So if you're going to go back in and edit your application, you've saved it and closed it, you can edit your application by clicking here. That's going to pull up a search window where you can put in your application ID. You can actually also put in your partner ID and search by that. If you remember your project title, you can search by your project title. So there's a couple ways that you can do that. So again, just going back over the submit, this one has the fields properly. This date will be filled in after you, at the time you hit the submit button. And again, do not forget your application ID. Well, you can always look it up later, but it's easier to remember it. Um, so again, to go over this, this is kind of a little bit repetitive. It's kind of one of the most, what I had the most questions about. How do I find my application? Um, if you have your application ID, that will stay with you all the way, and you can search for that, and it'll pull up every time. Tips and things to know. Again, do not, I can't stress this enough, do not wait till the last week to request access to the GMS. If 20 or 30 people do that, I, I don't know how to other than say you probably all won't get in. The RFP to expand existing and replace Non-functional DC fast sites will be released in April. Budget items should be as accurate as possible. You are scored on a cost effectiveness, and we're going to talk about scoring in a little bit, but the cost effectiveness score is where you can really make your differentiate your project from somebody else. DEQ does reserve the right to partially fund, partially award projects. Essays are used in evaluating projects scored. Um, we do not accept paper, scanned, email, or faxed applications. We will not accept applications after the due date. That submit button actually disappears at 11:59 at midnight. So if you wait till 11:59 and you kind of squeak it a little bit, it's going to go away and you won't have your application in. Do not sign agreements with vendors or start work until your contract is fully executed. There was a little bit of lag in the phase one funding. We won't have this time. We already have the funding. We're able to go into contracts as soon as um, we award your project. An application award is not a fully executed contract. An application as award is just that, just an awarded application. We will contact you for the additional information when we send you your award letter. Again, hey, if you're not on our emailing list, subscribe. That's the best and fastest way for you to get new information about what's up and coming with the program. So, as a slap, a slight reminder, this is a competitive reimbursement program. You do have to expend the funds before you can be reimbursed, and this is competitive. You do have to compete through the scoring process to have your project awarded. So let's talk about what you can do in the scoring process. The As I said before, the lifetime cost effectiveness is basically the VW funds per kilowatt charging. Well, that's a mouthful. Kilowatt charging rate times the number of ports. So you take the amount of VW funds that you've requested, you take the kilowatts and multiply that not by the number of ports. So if it's 50 and you have two ports, that's 100. You take your $100,000 from VW funds and you divide it by two. That is the cost effectiveness placeholder, and we will rank those. Whoever is the most cost effective will receive 20 points. Whoever is the least cost effective will receive 0 points. In phase one, we did a quartiles thing, but we're not doing this time. This time, depending on how many projects we have, they will be dispersed. Only one project will get 20. Only one project will get 0, and the next will be ranked in between 19 and 1. And that we will talk to you about that after we actually do it. Um, just remember, cost effectiveness is where you can really, if you're a municipality and you have in-kind costs that you can do, you have an electrician on staff, you have a somebody that can fix sidewalks and do curb and guttering. You have a plumber that can install conduit and trenching. You have those type of people that can do in-kind costs that is going to reduce what you're going to have to pay a contractor for. It's a great way to bring down your overall VW funds requested and boost your cost effectiveness score. Our average cost effectiveness last time for all our projects was right at 25%. That means that on average, um, grantees kicked in 25% of the cost for these chargers. Now, talking about distance to other DC fast charging stations, this is going to be a quartile system. That if you're not a quartiles, excuse me, it is four different things. So, but if you're over 100 miles, and there are a few sites that could potentially be over 100 miles to the nearest DC fast, that will not include dealerships or Tesla superchargers or non-functioning DC fast sites. That you'll get 20 points. If it's 51 to 99, you get 15 points. If it's 50 to 26, you get 10. If it's less than 25, you get 5. That's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of times, depending on if you're a municipality, you can't really pick a lot on this. It's very location based. You'll notice that with a lot of these. The distance off the interchange, the closer you are to the interchange, the better. If you're over 5 miles, we do not consider you to be at an interchange. Environmental justice. This is the definition that the United States Environmental Protection Agency defined environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policy. The US EPA, historically, people of color and people of low income, along with other vulnerable populations, have been disproportionately exposed to harmful pollutants. Our environmental justice score is was updated with the 2017 and 2019 surveys. And I don't know if it was updated for the current census of 2020, but I think it was. So if you want more information about that, it is in the RFP. And about the environmental justice score, it is basically just a lookup table, and that comes from our environmental justice team within the division. Traffic density is another one that's pretty self-explanatory. It's the average annual daily traffic. So, however many vehicles that pass by a certain area a day, the more, the higher your score. We have an AAD map, AADT map in the appendix. We actually use a resource to look up your actual address and see what the closest, or if you're between two different highways, depending on where you are in the state. We also look at the accessibility and proximity to amenities, which is the bathroom, food, local restaurants, and retail shopping. The closer you are, the better you score if they're on site. We can we consider a contiguous parking lot to be on site. So if your DC fast charger is in a grocery store or shopping center parking lot, your amenities are right there. Next is the renewable energy credit. This is a place where you can get 10 bonus points. The renewable energy certificates are, and I didn't have anybody, I will say I did think about changing this completely. If you did 100%, you get 10 points. Nobody in phase one did anything less than 100%. If you want to change your score, this is one of those areas where you can do renewable energy credits. If you don't know how to do renewable energy credits, I would suggest you reach out to your COGS. They can help you with this, your council of governments. You might have, you might have a county manager or a department in your county or your city that actually handles renewable energy credits. Certificate that keeps in credits. They're renewable energy certificates. But that's, I mean, you just have to expend the expected electricity use for the 5-year period. We're also giving 10 bonus points for historically under-resourced counties. These counties are listed in the RFP. This is, they were mostly tier 1 counties with an underserved population of greater than 15%. And I should have given you the reference of the appendix number that they are in the RFP, but it is one of the last pages in the RFP. Okay, so just to quickly overlook there of the scoring, there are 120 points available, but for most of you, you can't really go and change your location. You might be able to pick something a little bit closer to the interchange, but your county's your county. If your county doesn't have any priority corridors running through it, or we skip your county because there's already some infrastructure there, again, I say apply, but just with a reminder to do as much as you can in the areas where you can affect your cost effectiveness and your renewable energy credits. Those are going to be the cost effectiveness is where you can really differentiate your project from the projects around you. And then think about doing renewable energy certificates. Oh, sorry, I lost my mouse there. So there are 120 points. To be competitive last time, the thing you had to be in the 70s. I would say if I thought about it, you'd have to be at least 10 points higher this time because we've added 10 points. So that just gives you the groundwork of where you need to be on your self-assessment on your projects. I will tell you that in phase 1, we did, while we scored them, we gave the scores to the selection committee, and they decided to award projects across the state, looking at them more on a county by county basis along the priority corridors. That would open up more rural sites and allow some sites that possibly don't score as high as others. But the score is the score. If we have a bunch of high scoring projects, it's hard not to fund those through the selection committee. But I will say that the selection committee awards the projects. The score is used as guidelines for that selection. As a reminder, May 16th is your deadline at 11:59. That submit button will disappear at 12 o'clock. Don't be late. I want to score your projects. I want to give you money because it is burning a hole in my pocket. Again, your address to get on the grant management system, once you've gotten an email back from the NCDOT SAP team, because we like our acronyms, or at least some of us do, enough to make fun of them. We will not accept paper, scanned, emailed, or faxed applications. And at this point, we're not accepting paper GMS access forms. We do still need your paper, your PDF, North Carolina substitute W-9 form. So May 16th, 11:59 p.m. Do not forget. Again, the RFP is already out there. The application is open. You can ask for requests for GMS access right now, the grant management system. You do have to have your NCID. Proposals are due May 16th. We will be going into, as soon as May 16th rolls around, we'll be starting scoring. We'll go into the the project evaluations or application evaluations. That'll happen in May and June. In July, we'll have the selection committee will meet. July and August, we'll be announcing awards. As soon as awards are accepted and we get the necessary paperwork back from you, we will be going into the contract stage. You could be looking at holding a contract in your hands, signed and fully executed in September. You could start your projects in September, potentially August, depending on how our contracts, how all that plays out. Um, this is going to be a much faster process than we had in phase one. So we want to get this money, have some time to evaluate these projects, and make sure we spend this money here in North Carolina instead of it reverting back to the trust. Okay, so this is my contact information, which will be in the slides. Brian Phillips, the mobile sources compliance supervisor, that's his contact. If you have an outreach question, Robin Barrows is the person you will need to talk to. And again, for the last time, please subscribe. It is the best way to get information from us. And we will go into the questions now.
Okay, Dave. We got quite a few questions about the presentation being made available. That's been answered in the in the panel, but just so that everybody knows, yes, it will be, the presentation will be made available on our website. The first question is, the website says that RFPs for multi-unit dwellings and workplace come out in April. Is it April per the website or May per the slides?
Okay, so the multi-unit dwellings should be in, actually pulling up
I think the best thing to do is to say that,
April.
yeah,
April, what I'm thinking.
and you'll get notified if you have subscribed to our listserv.
Exactly.
Okay. How do I know if I should apply for a DC fast charger or a level 2 charger? I don't know which one I need in my community.
Okay, that is a great question. The difference between DC fast and level 2 is pretty easy. How long will the vehicle be parked? If the vehicle's going to be parked for more than an hour, it's level 2. If the vehicle's going to be parked less than an hour and it's on a priority corridor, it's DC fast. Or I say priority corridors, that's where we need them the most right now. But if it's a, we'll see them pop up as we get more along the priority corridors. They're going to backfill and go to places where you would stay less than an hour. But schools, community colleges, college campuses, places where you're going to be at for longer than an hour, that's level 2.
Okay. What if we have a charger with a maximum power output for 160 kilowatts, and for simultaneous charging, it divides the power to 85 kilowatts? How do we enter this detail?
All right. So this is where you need to think about how you're going to apply for it. So if you're going to do it as one port, then you can do it as 160. What was it, 165?
It
Yeah,
was
160,
160.
160 kilowatts. So if it's 160 kilowatts and you're doing it as one port, you could list it as 160. If you want to do it as two ports, you would list it as two ports at 85 kilowatts. So if when it divides down, it goes to 85. Um, we're not going, if you do it as two ports at 85, you're going to get the availability of funding is going to be more, but we're not going to pay more than you expend out, minus the 85% if you're non-government. And there's also the per port cap on that as well. So if you want to give me a call or email me your exact details, we can go over it. But that you have a little bit of flexibility there. I would just like to say that we do require in the RFP that every port has a CCS plug and a CHAdeMO plug. So if it's a dual port charger, you're going to have 4 cords.
Okay. The next question is, does the business entity have to be registered with the North Carolina? And then he used an acronym SOS, and I'm not actually sure what that is.
I don't know what SOSE is either.
So you might, Mr. Shaw, you might want to clarify that question. Okay, let's go on to the next question and we'll come back to that one. Dave, can you go into a little more detail on your statement earlier in the presentation where you said apply even if the proposed location is not on the priority corridor for the DC Fast Priority Corridors program?
Perfect. Yeah, great question. Okay, so the intention is that we get chargers from Murphy to Manio across the state. We have a lot of evacuation routes. Some of those, just the bare bones of the priority corridors across the state, are listed in our our map and our chart because we're only targeting the major ones. There are other areas across the state that could benefit with DC fast charging. While our intention is that we would get 125, whatever, however many projects we're going to be able to fund this round, and put every single one of those on gaps on our priority corridor that are listed, more than likely that won't happen. So there would be funding left over if we didn't open it up to any DC fast. And that's why I would say we never know how many people are going to apply. I might be begging people again, coming back around and saying, we have more funding, please apply. But we hope that we get a bunch of great projects and I don't have to turn anybody away. And that would be, and I spend all my money. That would be a perfect world for me. But we realize that we might not be able to expend all these funds on a priority corridor as we've listed now. And that's why I say, please apply.
Okay. How will sites off the priority corridors be scored in comparison to those on the priority corridors?
They would not get the points for being on the priority corridor.
Okay. Will historically under-resourced or equity points come into play for those for those that are off?
They would still be eligible for, they would still get an EJ score and they would still get the historically under-resourced bonus.
Okay.
Every county has an environmental justice score. Only the 37 that are designated historically under-resourced would get that bonus.
Okay. As a supplier, will I have access to those that were awarded the grant?
As a supplier, yes, we make it's public information that we have, but I would say it's a little bit too late at that point if you're trying to reach out to them because they have to submit budgets and stuff before they apply. But yes, it's public information who we award.
Okay. How do we determine if a non-functioning charger is near our proposed location?
Okay, so we mainly through one of the groups that are usually where that information either from Plug-in NC is where I usually hear it from, or the electric vehicles groups that are across the state. So if you have a car enthusiast group that they have a subgroup of electric vehicles, then they would be able to tell you. You can look on PlugShare, it'll tell you whether they're up and down. Also, the vendors are a good resource for that. Usually they'll have a pretty good handle on how old some of the equipment is out there.
Okay, next question. Will DEQ provide access to the average daily traffic map lookup tool for traffic counts?
Um, I don't know if it's through NCDOT. If you want me to call me and I can look up your score and tell you exactly what it would be, that would be probably the easiest. I don't know if I can give you access to the location where we get the actual AADT. But that is public information, so I mean that's something easily I can get you or give to you if you ask for your specific site.
Okay. We've had several requests for putting up the contact information slide and then also the subscribe slide. So maybe in a sec you can kind of glide through those. So that's the subscribe one. Okay. There was a comment about many suppliers are predicting very long delivery dates. Maybe you want to address that a little bit.
We do know that I mean we are having supply chain issues. Um, that's just kind of the world we live in right now. The contracts from DAQ or DEQ are basically 2-year contracts that are extendable. During phase one, um, I do have one contract that they were projecting a year out. Some of the more unique parts, we had one solar canopy project in phase one that seems to be potentially falling through because of parts, not the charger itself, just the solar canopy. There are vendors that I mean, are saying we can have your charger installed in 6 months. There are several that are US based that aren't having that problem. Um, there are a couple that are from overseas that are having um, more extended delays than that. But I haven't heard of any that were over 2 years. So we can extend your contract past the 2-year point.
Okay. Can NCDOQ assist in working with the local electric utilities as well?
Oh, okay. Not really. Um, Depending on who your local utility is, I might be able to talk with you about them. Give you the best resource for that is going to be whoever you pick as a vendor. They're going to be able to speak the same language as the electrical department at the utility, the, the equipment department at your local utility.
Okay, we had a follow-up question on the non-functioning chargers. Where can we find the listing location of non-functioning DC fast charging?
I do not have a list of non-functional existing DC fast.
Okay.
You
Can you
can use plug. Sorry, I was gonna say you can use the alt fuels map or plug share. A lot of times there'll be information about historical information about those chargers that are out there, but I do not have a list.
Okay. Can you please confirm that networking and software costs are considered eligible costs?
Okay, so networking is part of it. Depending on what you're talking about, software, that's also part of it. We do require um, networking for the DC Fast. If you're talking about a more complicated system than just the standard payment collection software, if you're talking about an integrated like vehicle to grid or something like that that's more costly, that's not really covered under this, but I wouldn't say that it's definitely not ineligible. You'd have to call me and or send me an email about what you're talking about.
How is the program defining an interchange?
Ooh, an interchange. On all the priority corridors that we've selected, um, an interchange is marked as an exit off an interstate or highway. There are some that are on the proposed 74 that aren't as clearly interchanges yet. 64 and 70 or and 158. Um, so if they're definitely not interstates, then that's a pretty loose definition. If it's an interchange, it'll have an exit number.
Okay. While the grant RFP says that federal entities are eligible, it also states the property must be publicly accessible. Since in non-pandemic times, my facility hosts conferences and large scientific meetings that the public can attend, would that count as publicly accessible? Otherwise, the facility is secure.
It has to be publicly accessible 24/7. So if your facility is publicly accessible 24/7, it is eligible. If it is not, it is not eligible.
Okay.
And we're only talking about DC fast. We're not talking about level 2 charging.
Okay. In a large organization, it is difficult to know who or how many people are in the NCID system. If I apply and there are already the maximum of 3 from my organization, will I get an error?
Okay, so the max isn't with the NCID. Your organization can have way more people with NCIDs. The access is to our portion of the grant management system. So you can only have 3 grant management users for DEQ, DAQ. I mean, not DEQ, DAQ for for the Volkswagen project. So there's no limit on how many NCIDs an organization can have. The limit is on how many people can get into the Volkswagen grant management system.
Okay. Here's another clarifying question on delivery dates. Many manufacturers are predicting very long delivery times. I heard this morning up to 30 weeks for a 120 kilowatt to 180 kilowatt charger. Once the contract is agreed, is this the soonest date we can order the equipment?
Um, Depending on who your manufacturers are, I know the lead times for some of the others. I went around and checked, and um, Andrew, Richard, if you wanted to give me a call later, we can talk about it. There are some that have better lead times than that, that have chargers in that range. Um, you might you might want to either switch it. I don't know who you work for, but um, it might be something that you could either change your manufacturer, try a different OEM, a vendor. Um, but yeah, I mean, 30 weeks isn't. I mean, 3 years is that's almost 3 years. So, but yes, the soonest you can order your equipment is going to be when you have a signed executable contract.
Okay. Is there a way to estimate the annual electricity usage in megawatt hours for the renewable energy certificates?
Yes, there is. The best place to get that is from your vendor, your equipment vendor. They'll be able to help you with that.
And a follow-up question on that, could you speak a bit more about the renewable energy certificates? I'm familiar with SRECs, but not in relation to electric vehicle charging equipment.
Again, the best place that you're going to find the information for that is from your the charging infrastructure vendor that you choose.
Okay. We had a question.
They
Sorry.
are the same, pretty much.
Okay. Someone asked the question, is there a map of the priority corridors? And Dave did show a map, and it will be part of the presentation. If I have 25 sites, do I create a separate application for each?
Yes.
Okay. If a proposed project entails installing charging equipment at a business, does the charging equipment need to be accessible to the general public and not just the employees to be eligible for funding?
For the DC Fast, yes, it has to be uh, available to the public 24/7, and it would not be available for workplace charging. I mean, if you had somebody in your business that charged there, you could, but I mean, DC Fast, it would only need to be plugged in for 30 minutes or so.
Okay.
This is intended to be 24/7 publicly accessible charging.
Okay. We are constructing a new building right off an exit off of Highway 40. The site has been prepped for utilities for the new building and utilities for the parking lot. Is the work that is going on now something that we can include in the match or not?
So existing work would be a no. Um, if you're at that point, you can always get your conduit and stuff in the ground, so you don't have to come back and tear up sidewalk and concrete. That's going to be a lot cheaper that way than doing it vice versa. So no, and I'm sorry that it can't. But I do. I mean, where you are in your project, it sounds like you're pretty close to start getting the building up. So yeah, if you wanted to include that as a potential site, my suggestion would be go ahead and bury the conduit.
Okay, and there's another question that kind of is a follow-up to that. If a location is or will be under construction, how far along can the project be at the time a grant contract is awarded?
So I mean, we'll install DC fast chargers at existing sites now. My suggestion to you, just like I just said, is if your project is going on, go ahead and have the conduit put in underground. It's not going to cost you anything. You can always have the electrical pulled later, but have the conduit put in place to where you think the parks are going to be.
Okay. We got clarification on what SOS
Secretary of
means.
State. Secretary of State. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
do
Yeah.
they need to be registered with the Secretary of State?
Um, that is not a me question. That's a business office question. I can write that down and find out for you.
I believe they do need to be registered with Secretary of State.
Okay. To do business in the state with the state, you have to
Yes.
be, yeah. So then yes.
Okay. Um, we had a question, will the responses to our questions be posted as frequently asked questions on our website?
And yes, I believe we're trying to come up with some frequently asked questions for the website.
Okay.
Yes, they will be. I'm working on it.
Okay. Is it possible to apply for both fast chargers and the level 2 program, or should we pick one or the other?
No, we'd love you to apply for everything. Get some money from every pot. That'd be perfect because we want to get rid of it. So no, you're not limited. The only limit you have is that this is a reimbursement program. All of our things you have to pay for up front and then you get reimbursed. As long as you have the funds available to do that, then yeah, more power to you.
Okay. Are mobile DC fast charge units eligible?
Oh, I'm gonna punt on that question. I we do require a lot of site specific information. So I'm gonna have to get Andrew's information and get back with him on that one. But I'm gonna say more than likely not. Um, but I'd like to look into it just to verify.
Okay. So does this mean that chargers outside the priority corridors have a chance at getting funding if the priority corridors don't use all the money?
That's absolutely 100% true. And that's what happened last time. We only had about 60% of the funds were expended on the priority corridors, and then everything else went to off the priority corridors.
Okay. In a past informational webinar, I noted that we were located less than a mile from a medical waste incineration facility. I was told to include this in the application once it opens. Does the EJ score take care of this? Should I note this elsewhere in the application?
So the EJ score takes into account your the NOx in your county at a county level. So if it's in your same county, that would already be included in your EJ score.
Okay.
But, if it's I mean, this is supposed to be a diesel emission reduction project through the whole Volkswagen. So you can include it. Any more information is better than less information.
Okay. Does this grant require the installation of a particular brand of fast charger, or will it help fund installing the infrastructure, i.e. trenching, conduit wiring, etc. for the installation after the 2-year construction completion deadline?
We are vendor neutral. As long as the vendor that you choose is who you want. We only install generic chargers. We're not funding Tesla or Electrify America chargers. Um, the um, what was the other part of that?
So it's Jonathan West's question, Dave, just if you're looking at the list, but it has to do with trenching, conduit, wiring, etc. It
Yeah,
comes after the 2-year.
there's a whole
The project must be completed within the contract period to be reimbursed. If you're
yeah,
having issues with parts and materials, you need to contact the program manager at that time,
yeah.
toward the end of the
All
contract period.
Yeah, and all eligible costs are included in the RFP. There's a list, and that comes from not just our RFP, but from the consent decree.
Will other considerations such as innovative technologies or energy storage integration to mitigate peak load, etc., be factored into scoring?
Into scoring, no. Interesting projects would could potentially win out um because they're interesting. If you have interesting aspects to your project, you definitely need to let us know in your essays. So as we read those, we can see why your cost effectiveness might be lower than some of the other projects.
Okay. Does NCDEQ have any insight in dealing with demand charges from the utilities?
Okay, so insights, yes. Actually dealing with them, The best thing to do is talk with your utility provider and see when your demand charges are. I mean, we don't get into what you charge for the electricity. I mean, well, for the charging at the site. That's on you guys. We stay out of that. Um, if you have demand charges, it might be best to have a higher. I mean, I know several sites that we've already installed have a higher rate at certain times of the day, depending on when their peak hours are.
Okay. Can you talk more about the matching funds aspect of this funding?
Okay. We don't have any, the matching funds would be you going out and finding them from somewhere else. Whether you have community available funds for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, that's just a placeholder. If you have a discount that you're going to get from whoever is doing your trenching or whatever, or you're getting that work done in kind, that's where you would put those, list those.
Okay. Can you clarify the funding for different power levels again? I.e., must a dual port charger be able to charge 2 CCS or 2 CHAdeMO at the same time to get funding for each port?
Okay, so there's a little bit more in that question that I'd like to get into. Graham, if you could give me a shoot me an email and give me kind of the details of what you want or what your charger has on it. Um, I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit more offline.
Okay. What are the criteria for your county to be eligible for the grant?
For your
All,
um
all 100 counties in North Carolina are eligible.
every county, there's no county that's not eligible. Some counties will score better because they have a priority corridor running through them. Some counties will score better because they're historically under resourced. Some counties will score better because they have a different environmental justice score.
Okay.
But all counties are eligible.
Another clarifying question about suppliers. Do you have any recommendations for suppliers that are US based?
No, I just know that there are some that are US based. That's something that we're not allowed to do is give out recommendations.
Okay. Can you confirm, in addition to the chargers being available 24/7, the supporting amenities must be available, also be open 24/7?
Okay, so no, the amenities do not. So if the restaurant closes at 11 o'clock and doesn't reopen until 5 in the morning, that's fine. That's that's to be expected even when you're traveling. Sometimes gas stations aren't open 24/7. Or you can get outside, but you can't get into the bathroom.
Another question about separate applications. Do I need a separate it says a separate account for each location.
No, you can do multiple applications under your one account. So, my suggestion, having done lots of applications, make sure you assign them names that are specific. So if one's going at a food line, that you put food line, and if one's going to uh, Lowe's Home Improvement, that you name them appropriate, so you can keep them straight.
Okay. We have an additional question about being able to get into the grant management system. In a large organization, it is difficult to know who or how many people are in the DAQ GMS. If I apply and there are already the maximum of 3 from my organization, will I get an error?
No, but you'll probably get an email from me or Brian saying, "Hey, you've already got your 3." Um, and I'm not sure. I think maybe that they'll send us if it slips by us, it'll go to the security team. Their support team won't do a fourth one.
Okay.
So
If
yes,
the
you would get notified in some way. So that's the answer. Yes, you'll get notified.
Okay. If the business is not 24/7, but the access to the location is available 24/7, for example, a Chick-fil-A, is that location considered a 24/7 location?
Yes. That is considered 24/7. If it's at a business that they put a fence around it and then lock the fence, that is not considered 24/7.
I think this next question might be the same about 24/7. Do all suppliers provide the customer support services required 24/7?
Okay, I was trying to find that.
It's
All-
Renee McCullen.
Do all suppliers provide the customer support service? I don't know the answer to that. You would have to ask your vendor about that.
Okay. The next question is, can you confirm the distance to the interchange is driving distance as opposed to linear distance?
It's technically driving distance. We didn't when we looked at maps, it wasn't really that hard to figure out. Using Google Maps. I mean, it should be driving distance. Yes, driving distance.
And I guess a similar question was, is the distance between charging stations linear distance or driving distance?
Only driving distance, and that is correct. It should do not count. It has to be non-Tesla, non-dealership, and 50. If it's less than 50 kilowatts, it's not considered DC fast. And there's not that. There are a few left that are less than 50 kilowatts that but not many.
Okay. Those are all the questions so far that are typed in the question and answer. I don't know if Stephen or anybody can see any hands raised. There is one additional question. How do you become a vendor?
You have um so to do business in the state of North Carolina, obviously you have to sign up with the SOS, the Secretary of State's office. But
Yeah. Page 7 of the RFP defines eligible applicants, and for a business, you have to be registered with the Department of Secretary of State. So you would need to go to that website and figure out the procedures for doing that.
While we have some dead air, Jill, I will say there's only look like 3 call-in users and no hands raised right now.
Okay, there's one that's a comment. FYI, there are station management software systems out there that manage demand charges by reducing the output of stations using configurable peak period during configurable peak period. So that was a note, and then there's a question. In the event a project is delayed, can the contract be amended to allow for an extended timeline if the program manager is notified in time?
yes, we can extend projects.
Okay. I do have one other question that came just to me. Does the grant require the installation of a particular brand of fast charger, or will it help fund installing the infrastructure? Oh, wait. Maybe that's one we already asked. But basically, do we require a particular brand?
We don't have, I mean, as long as it's not, no, we don't have a preferred vendor. And it meets the RFP requirements, then no.
Okay. To be clear, each port needs to have a CCS and CHAdeMO, even if the cables could be used simultaneously.
Each port does need to have the CCS and the CHAdeMO, yes. Whether they can be used simultaneously or not, it's a requirement that it has both at each port.
Okay. There's a question about the corridor. The I-95 corridor is on the state network. Is I-295 and I-95 business considered to be the same?
They are not. I-95 is the actual interstate. I-295, that's down at Fayetteville, I think, or is that the one that runs to Goldsboro? I get them confused. That is not considered the priority corridor at this time, and business I-95 is not. Yeah, it's Fayetteville. Thank you. But yeah, 295 is not the priority corridor.
Okay, we had a question. Do most locations charge for the DC charging? If so, on average, how much?
I'd rather not. Yes, most places charge for DC fast charging, and I'd rather not get into the amount that's charged.
Okay, if a dual port charger has one port as CCS and one port as CHAdeMO, will that be sufficient?
Um, Maybe call me and talk to me, or shoot me an email with your details about your charger. Um, if it's what I think it is, yeah, that'd probably be fine. The world, and yes, I do understand the world is moving away from CHAdeMO finally. To CCS. So yeah, give me a call, and but we do have the RFP requirements that we have to live within.
Okay. When determining port charging capacity, should we use the higher number from the cables or the lower? I ask because CHAdeMO connectors can be lower.
Yes, CHAdeMO is usually lower. Um, just say it's a 75, and the CHAdeMO only goes up to 50. Just go with the 75. The majority of your charging instances are going to be with the CCS anyway. And if you have a question about that, send me an email.
Okay, and then we
There's a
got a
lot
little,
of
go
little
ahead.
intricate things that are going on with the chargers at that point.
Okay. We have a little bit of a clarification on one of the questions. Will the grant fund the infrastructure install so that a brand of fast charger can be installed after the completion date?
Ooh, no, we would not fund anything that we wouldn't pay for anything. It has to be in the ground and operational before we could fund it.
Okay. Does a current leased location with a lease longer than 5 years need to have a host site agreement?
Yeah, probably yes, probably because you're dealing with a landowner and property leasee. So sometimes you'd have to get both. I've seen several instances where it's best to get both. But usually the property owner is not going to go against what a leasee wants.
I'd like to remind everyone when typing questions into the question and answer box to make sure that you're sending them publicly and not privately to Jill. Thank you.
Those are all the questions that I see right now, Dave.
Okay, so in about 10 minutes, that burning question that you couldn't remember is gonna pop up. Just send them to me and I'll forward them to Robin. So we can add them to the FAQ and I'll get you an answer back as soon as I can.
Dave, maybe you should go ahead and put up the contact
Oh, yeah,
email
sorry.
addresses again. Perfect.
I meant to go back to that earlier.
It appears that you have answered all the questions, Dave.
Perfect. Again, if you need to reach out to us, please do. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to attend this. And just remember, if you have those questions, send them to me, Brian, Robin. If it's not me or somebody else, we'll get the question to the right person. And again, I'd just like to say thank you all for attending, and that'll conclude our meeting for today.